I'm Dahlia Valle. I teach at Kingsborough Community College. It's a city university of New York. I teach women in American history as well as an intro to women's studies course, and I teach American history at another institution in Manhattan. My presentation, I named it A Public Voice for Public Bodies, the question mark. And it's very much, this entire presentation is very much a work in progress. There is no like formal paper that's been put together. It's kind of just, it was a last minute put together thing. I'm like, I'm gonna try and do this 5 college women's studies resource center thing. And then they picked me and I was like, oh no. So here's what I came up with. An overview of my topic, and this is just taken directly from the abstract, is the public realm has historically been forbidden for women's ideas and actions, yet their bodies are open for public attacks, both physically and verbally. With an interest into a digital age, do women and their bodies have a voice, or is the cyberverse just a replication of patriarchal and misogynistic culture? I'm not going to read the whole thing because that's boring, but this is basically what I submitted. And then just a little brief thing about why I came up with this topic. I do participate in online activism. This is, I know it's kind of hard to see, but it's a screenshot of my inbox, what it usually looks like in the morning. And I know you can't really see it, but basically all of those dark ones are new messages, and only 2 of them are personal messages. The rest are from NARAL, Housing Works, Credo, MoveOn.org, a dance organization that I belong to, things like that. And how overwhelming it can be in the morning to wake up and see all of these things like action needed now. And how, and if this translates, because it only takes me 1 second to sign a petition, and this is what people have named clicktivism or slacktivism, which I will define in a little bit. Also, I'm awkward and kind of fear being out in open spaces, and so this is a very good venue for me. So what I was able to fit in this particular presentation, due to the time constraints, the historical nature of women in the public sphere, particularly focusing on the United States, since that's what I research and teach, a definition of the public sphere, again in the United States, how women's bodies, how women's bodies are treated in the public sphere, an explanation of remote activism, also known as clicktivism, slacktivism, examples of women using internet to establish a voice and agency, and whether or not an online community is useful and is effective. So historical perspective, I'm sure some of you have heard of this before, coverture. It's a historical idea that before women had any sort of sovereignty of themselves, their agency was through their husband or through their male, or their father or closest male relative. So it was seen as unnecessary for women to actually have a political voice because they had a man who could give them that voice. And this was an argument against women's suffrage, in particular, the right for women to vote here in the United States. Why do women need a vote if they have a husband? Which, of course, we can take apart and yell about forever. But these are very important ideals, and these are ideas that are still supported by some people today, like Phyllis Schlafly. Also, women could not own or inherit property in the United States for a very long period of time. Married Women's Property Act in New York in the mid-19th century was the first time that became kind of contested, but as soon as the Civil War started, the Married Women's Property Act went away. Also, and then all of this kind of adds up to women not having a political political status. The history of women in the United States shows a very strong lack of political status, or the need to use alternate methods for activism or to try and find a voice. So historically, the public sphere has been a male-dominated sphere. Public meaning politics, education, even the clergy, being a member of the clergy. In the mid-19th century, or until the mid-20th century, women in the public sphere were considered indecent or judged harshly by men and women alike. So the virtue of being outside in the public, I'm a woman standing in front of a group of both men and women, was very problematic, and people harshly criticized women who did this. And I have a clip. Have any of you seen Iron Jawed Angels? It's a film about women's suffrage. And on the day in 1912, when Woodrow Wilson was elected as president, the National Women's Suffrage Association put on a parade showing, because women didn't get the right to vote till 1920 in the United States, showing that they were very serious about women's suffrage, and they wanted President Wilson's attention. And so this is a clip showing that parade. And it goes on to show the reaction, how the crowd goes from occasional shouts and threats of violence to actual violence in a mob scene. A lot of the men in the crowd start questioning whether or not they're really women, like what's under your skirt, you want to be a man, and things like that. And this was a very real reaction that many suffragists faced in the early 20th century when going into public and asking for the right to vote. Okay. All right, moving into actual how women's bodies are treated in a public physical space. I talk to my students a lot about where it's appropriate, ask them where it's appropriate to touch women. And we've kind of deconstructed what touch means in public. For example, touching like an open hand on the shoulder to get one's attention versus gently caressing the small of a woman's back at a bar to try and move her out of the way, and how those are subtle distinctions that are very meaningful, particularly for people who have had trauma. And so we talk about that and how it seems like that's acceptable. That kind of sexual touching is acceptable when it comes to the public. Of course, street harassment. I live in Brooklyn, and travel through Brooklyn and New York City. Street and everywhere, street harassment is very, very common. I don't think there is a woman who has not experienced some form of catcalling, whistling, etc., and how that is very accepted in our culture. And I've always been fascinated by pregnant women's bodies and how people who don't know women, like when my sister was pregnant, who just strangers walked up to her and touched her belly. And I'm like, why do you think that's okay? You know, this is my body. You don't go up to someone who you don't know and say, oh, did you have a large lunch today? You know, you don't, that it's a very personal and private space that people feel they have the right to touch, and how problematic that is. And then women's bodies on display. We are inundated with sexualized images of women daily. You can't go outside and not see some form of women's skin, and how this kind of adds to how women are represented and how we're seen as kind of public property, our bodies. A very public ridicule of women's bodies from both men and women. I always want to add in that women are also very critical of other women. And then moving into social networking sites, this what I fear is a disconnect between the public nature of social networking sites, particularly for young women who, as Lisa Nakamura said, there's a, though you have a small online community who sees these images, those images never go away. And so you put those images out there and you may not realize the gravity of showing, I don't know, what's called, I forget what they call it, but it's that shot from the camera that's like down this way, and it's the sexy shot that I have a 17-year-old cousin who posts those on Facebook all the time, and it makes me so nervous. So a disconnect with whether or not this is a public space or not, and whether or not young people realize it is very public. In particular, the Amanda Todd incident, which I think it was last year. It was a young woman who posted and communicated with an older man who then stalked her online and started uploading sexual images that she had sent to him under the guise that he was a young man as well. And just kind of the whole experience that she went through. She was severely ridiculed by her peers. She was bullied all online, and she committed suicide. And she was only 15. And when the story came out, this is when my idea for this started to kind of germinate, because I was so affected by what had happened to Amanda Todd, and being on Facebook and having students who are, since it's a community college, most of them are under the age of 20, a lot of them add me to their Facebook accounts, and then I see what they post on Facebook, and then all I keep imagining is Amanda Todd and how the struggle that she had to face, etc. So there is still a lot of work there is a lot of work out there about internet as a tool of empowerment and agency. Mingus Trammell and Monica Dillon-Hunt's study, Black Girls Talking Back, How Black Girls Use Facebook and Blogs to Resist Marginalization, is a really fascinating study, and they say that identity construction on social networking media sites may allow Black girls to construct an identity without societal judgments and limitations of their abilities, which directly refutes my fear that social networking sites could expose young women to danger. Also, Lauren Berlant's Intimate Publics, the in an intimate public, you encounter stories of survival tactics and what it has meant to survive or not. It promises the sense of being loosely held in a societal world. You don't have to do anything to belong once you show up and listen. You can be passive and lurk in the intimate public, deciding when you appear and disappear, and you can consider the delegation of political attention and emotion the exercise of your sovereign freedom. For in liberal societies, freedom includes freedom from the obligation to be political, etc. So all very, very good points. Very quickly, I'll explain clicktivism or slacktivism in terms of social media's ability to strengthen social movements. Critics writing primarily in the popular press and on blogs have suggested that these technologies may in fact be promoting a form of slacktivism or clicktivism instead of activism, and do little more than promote weak ties, which can bring a million people to a Facebook page but fail to mobilize 1,000 people on the street to actively affect change. So this is kind of a negative response to this online activism. I don't know if any of you have heard of Hollaback. It's an online community that promotes basically calling out street harassers. It's not Gwen Stefani. It's its own thing, and it's actually had some success, and it's been very popularized. And in Europe, they're actually talking about, in the UK, they're talking about creating a law that makes it illegal to wolf whistle or cat call. It's been supported by the Prime Minister, and this was really big last year. However, legislating this and then also monitoring this will, of course, be very challenging. My students were very upset by this bill. I'm not sure why, but they were. So conclusions, I'm just left with a lot of questions that I still have to meet out. Can the internet provide a safe space for expression and create agency, or is it just another place tied to the patriarchal public sphere? The community provided through social networking sites should not be dismissed, of course. I actually really, really wanted to get as many people as I knew to watch me do this live stream as a form of like virtual community. I think the only person watching is my mom, and she was very nervous that she wouldn't get it. She's like, I can't do it, but I think she's watching. How I feel I'm very happy that my mom is watching it. So even though she's not here in the audience, knowing that she's out there is a comfort to me. And so I can't dismiss that either. As well as yesterday, I haven't seen my students at Kingsborough for 2.5 weeks because of spring break and because of the conference. So I created a vlog for the first time ever and posted it for my students to talk about what's going on right now and my thoughts. And then I felt a connection to them remotely in that way. And so kind of taking apart my own discrimination towards slacktivism, but also being aware of how it is a very real emotion to be connected to someone virtually. Thank you.